Good morning, teachers of Whale Branch Elementary. My name is Captain Byrne. I'm the Community Support Officer with the Burton Fire District, here to do your annual Stop the Bleed training. Now, I start off this training every year by thanking teachers for being here. I have a student that's in the Beaufort County School District. My wife's a school teacher, so I know what you all are going through, so thank you very much. But this year, even more so. We're entering in unprecedented times. I know firsthand there's a lot of anxiety on behalf of parents and the families as well of teachers as you go into next week. But we're here for you, we're here to help you, and we're here to support you in any way. But thank you for being here, and thank you for doing what you do for our community every day. You guys truly are heroes. So we're going to talk about the Stop the Bleed program. Whale Branch Elementary is actually part of the Jacob Kit program, which we're proud to say here in Burton all of our schools participate in. What the Jacob Kit program is a small bleeding control kit or a trauma kit that should be in every classroom by your classroom door. Now here at Whale Branch it's going to be a little different because you're under construction and classes are moving. But if you don't have a kit in your room or in your space, please get with your school nurse or principal and make sure you get one up. We have one for every classroom here in the school. The program is named after Jacob Hall. Jacob Hall was a 6-year-old student from Townville, South Carolina, who was wounded in a school shooting. He survived the initial wound. His teacher was right there. She was able to apply aid. He survived the initial wound, but he died 3 days later at the hospital due to massive blood loss. The school had these kits. The schools didn't distribute the kits. The teachers weren't trained. Now, whether or not the kit would have saved Jacob's life, no one knows. The doctors definitely agree it would have helped. So it's in Jacob's name and honor that we have this program, and we're making sure every classroom has it and the teachers are trained. This is one more thing we're adding to your plate, teachers, and as a former military veteran, retired, and at that time I was a medic in the military as well, I'm teaching you the skills that I learned as a combat medic. It is very uncomfortable for me to teach, but these are the times that we're in. One more thing on your plate, but we're here to help you get it through. So as part of the Jacob Kit program and Stop the Bleed, the first priority always is your safety. Your safety is paramount. It's hard to tell teachers and parents because these are your babies and you want to take care of them. But one teacher that is with her students, 25, 20 students, and a live, healthy teacher is the most important thing that we can have. So at no time in this training are we encouraging or asking you to, or even expecting you to put yourself at unnecessary risk to render aid. The best thing you can do is stay alive, stay healthy, stay with your class, keep them safe. But I do want to ask and encourage all of you teachers today to start challenging the policies in the district. The emergency response plan or even here in the school. Start asking yourself what-if questions. A lot of effort's been put forth to put these plans together, but you never know they're going to work until the actual event takes place. But one way we can prepare ourselves is asking you teachers to ask those what-if questions. What if I was following the district's policy and I heard a gunshot, or I started to see smoke, or I smelled a chemical? This is what I'll do. This is what I'm expected to. Does it work? And if you see problems, please bring it up to the administration so we can address it. Maybe there's a better way to do it. So ask yourself those what-if questions, not only for the plan, but for you as well. For example, the school district policy says that if you go into a lockdown situation, you don't ever open that classroom door until law enforcement comes in. But are you prepared to hear the student on the other end of that door knocking, begging for you to open that door? The policy says you shouldn't, and you shouldn't, but are you ready to make that decision? So we ask school teachers to please think along those lines and challenge yourself and come to peace with the decisions that you're going to have to make, so when the time comes, you're ready to make those decisions and make them confidently and save lives. Difficult times that we're in, but these are the times that we have to address. If there's any questions or any problems, please let the Burton Fire District know. We're more than happy to help get you through. So the first step is your safety. Make sure that your students are safe. Make sure that you're safe. Make sure you're in a secure location. And if you have a wounded student, the first thing that you want to do is expose themselves. Okay, so we have this kit in the classroom. They're mounted by the door for a couple of reasons. One, so as you egress the school or evacuate the school, you can take this kit with you. So if you're on the schoolyard or if you're in the hallway and you need it, it's there with you. Even if you evacuate within the school, within your classroom into the bathroom, take it with you. So if you do have a student that's sick or injured, you have this kit with you. It should be with you at all times. Inside the kit, the first thing that you have, and like I'm wearing on my hands for expediency today, is you have medical gloves, just like I have on my hands. Put these gloves on. Inside the blood, there's a lot of germs, there's a lot of bacteria, there's a lot of viruses for you and for them. So try to put a barrier between yourself and the student before you start rendering aid. If you don't have the gloves, or if your hands are sweating, you can't get your hands in them, believe me, that happens, or they break, or for whatever reason they don't fit, though they should, then just make sure you have a barrier. You can use a sandwich bag, you can even use bulky clothing, but try to put a barrier between yourself and the student's wound. So place on the gloves. The next thing you want to do is see where the child is injured. Also in your kit is you have what we call trauma shears or scissors. These are tough enough that can cut through belts, they can cut through jeans, they can cut through just all kinds of clothing. So expose the injured area. We encourage expose the entire child. For example, if it's a bullet wound, where the bullet went in doesn't necessarily mean where it's going to come out. A bullet can enter through the leg and exit through the chest. So it's important to take a look at the entire body. Keep in mind, even the injuries that look the worst aren't necessarily the one that's going to kill that child. So it's important that you find the most critical injuries and you start treating it right away. One of the ways is to determine the level of bleeding. There's 3 types of bleeding, but what you're looking for is a bleeding that's actually pulsating out of the wound every time the child's heart beats. That's coming directly from the heart, and you need to stop that right away. But to wrap it up and to make it easy for you, if you see a lot of blood and you think that it's a serious bleed, go ahead and treat it as such. You can never, never, never over-treat a patient. You can definitely under-treat. So if you see a child that's bleeding and you just think that's a lot of blood, go ahead and treat it as such. But make sure you get a complete look at the child. Make sure you expose the child, at least expose the area that's injured. Flip the child over, take a look at the back, take a look at the front, take a look at their head, take a look at their feet, take a look at everything that you can to find where you might, to go ahead and find where you might have that injury and go ahead and begin to treat it. So you protected yourself, the gloves. You've exposed the child with the scissors. The next thing in any type of bleeding is just like you do here at home, direct pressure, right? You want to put pressure on the wound to stop the bleed. 99.9% of the time, that's going to stop the bleeding. I've been in emergency medical services for over 30 years now. I have never had to go beyond direct pressure. It's always worked for me. So it's probably going to work for you too. So this is the best way to stop bleeding. Inside your kit, you have a trauma bandage right here. Very similar to this one that I have here in my hand. So you simply open up the bandage, find the pad, put it on the wound, direct pressure. You can even use direct pressure by wrapping the wound tightly to keep that pressure on. You can use your knee. If you have to, you can ask another child to hold that pressure. This is going to stop 99.9% of your bleeding. It would also help to elevate, to put the level of the wound above the heart, kind of slow the bleeding down. But this should work. Okay? If you don't have a bandage, or if you used it and you used another one, you can use anything in your classroom, from clothing to any type of material that you can use to use direct pressure. Even your gloved hand, in the absence of a bandage, is enough to possibly stop that bleeding. Direct pressure is the first way to do it. Now, if that's not working, once you have the bandage on, if the bandage becomes saturated in blood and the person is still bleeding, never remove the bandage. The body's a very resilient machine. It knows how to correct itself. So immediately, as soon as you have the wound, it's going to begin to clot. If you apply direct pressure and then remove that bandage, you could possibly rip those clots and cause even further damage. So once the bandage is on, it stays, it never gets removed. You can put another bandage on top of it, or you can go directly to tourniquets. Tourniquets are right here as well inside your kit. Orange is an indication that it's put on by a bystander, or you. If it's black, it's put on professionally. If it's blue, it's a training tourniquet. But the tourniquet, go ahead and take that out. You can go to the tourniquet first. If you have a child or a student that looks like they're bleeding really bad, you don't have to do direct pressure. You can go right to the tourniquet if you feel that is warranted. Erase your mind. For years, we're always trained that this is a bad thing, that you never use it, only use it in the last case resort. We have found that this is probably the best way to save somebody's life. Don't ever be afraid to use it. You cannot hurt a child or a student or an injured person by using it, but you definitely can hurt them by not using it or not using it quick enough. Tourniquets are relatively easy to use. When you open it out of a kit, this is blue for training, it'll open up just like this. There's a loop. Open it up just like you would a belt. Now, what we train teachers, again, like we train our combat medics and our tactical medics, okay, you want to put them high and tight. These are for limbs, for legs, and for arms. They're not for necks, they're not for chests, they're not for abdomen, and that's actually on the directions, so somebody's tried to do that somewhere along the line. For limbs, for legs, and for arms. So if I had an injury down here that you felt needed a tourniquet, you would put it directly up on top of the limb. What you're doing is you're shutting down the entire blood flow to that extremity. So therefore, you're stopping the bleed. If you don't want to put it too close because you could cause further bone injury, or you could miss the bleeding vessel altogether as it constricts. High and tight. These tourniquets that we have in the Jacob kit, they're called CAT tourniquets, C-A-T tourniquets. These are what we use in the battlefield. These are what our tactical medics use, and this is what your law enforcement officers and firefighters carry with us, because they have the highest chance of success. So easy you could put it on yourself. So you go high and tight. You take the loop, you simply slide it over your extremity that you have the bleeding on, and you pull it tight as you possibly can, just like you would your belt, and it velcros into place. Remove this tab here, move it out of the way, And then you have a windlass or a dowel, and you just simply twist. And you keep twisting until the bleeding stops or until you possibly can't twist it anymore. And then you just simply lock it into place. Take this tab, put it over. You can dress it up and protect it, keep it in place. Things to remember. Once this is on, it stays on. You never take it off. You don't loosen it, you don't move it, no matter how much the person might say it's uncomfortable. Just like with the clotting, if you release this, the blood will flow, possibly cause more bleeding. Once it's on, it stays on. It's going to hurt. If the person asks you to please stop, it's uncomfortable, don't, please stop. You have to keep going until the bleeding stops or until you can't twist anymore. You're saving their life. Difficult situation to be in, but one of those things that you have to commit yourself to, that this is what you have to do to save them. If that does not stop the bleeding, then you can, again, try again direct pressure, or you can put another tourniquet on beneath. Another thing to keep in mind with tourniquets, never put them on a joint. The blood vessels run through the bones, so you won't get that bite on the blood vessel that you need. Also, as you move elbows, it could loosen up the tourniquet. Make sure that the patient should be totally exposed, that extremity, to put the tourniquet on. But it doesn't have to be. You can put these over clothes if you need to. Just make sure you remove cell phones, you remove wallets, or anything within that clothing that could be bulky and prevent that tight bite on the body that you have to get in order to make the tourniquet work. Once it's on to stay. Don't hesitate to use it. The only person that will take this off is the surgeon on the surgery table. Not the paramedics that come in the room, not the emergency doctor that receives you, but the surgeon on the surgery table is the only person that takes this tourniquet off. So now we've talked about direct pressure, we've talked about tourniquet to control bleeding. But what happens if you are bleeding from your neck? Right here you have carotid arteries providing blood to your brain just below the surface. Doesn't take a big nick to cause some serious damage. How would you stop this bleeding? What happens if the bleeding is up underneath your armpit where your brachial artery runs down, or out down into your legs and your femoral arteries where you can't get a tourniquet because it's too high up? How are you going to stop that wound? Again, just like we talked about before, direct pressure. If direct pressure is not working, you have to pack the wound. Now, packing the wound is an uncomfortable thing. It's something that even as a paramedic up until 2 years ago, I wasn't even allowed to do in the field. But now that we're training paramedics and we're training you to do it as well, because it can't hurt the patient, you can only help the patient. Right here are bandages for packing the wound. And when you unroll those bandages, it will look very similar to this. Okay? So if you have a wound, again, this is on the neck or in the armpit or up in the groin area, and you can't put a tourniquet on, you have the wound, first thing you do, as we discussed, direct pressure. That's not working. So you have to do something else. Take your gloved finger and insert it into the wound. Okay? You're going to try and feel around the wound for pressure. Where the pressure's coming out, that's where the blood's coming out, and that's where you have to apply pressure with your finger in the wound. Now, if you cannot feel that pressure, I have never done this in all my years in EMS, and I'm hoping I never have to. But if you can't find that pressure, put your finger in the wound and point towards the heart. So if it's in your neck, point down. If it's in your arm, point in. If it's in your groin area, point up. Because that's where the blood vessels coming from the heart is traveling. So insert your finger inside the wound, find the pressure. If you can't, point up towards the heart, direct pressure with your finger. Maintain that pressure. Take that gauze, take the end of the gauze, and stuff it into the wound while maintaining that pressure inside. Push it in, and then switch. And then switch. And then switch. Always maintaining pressure up in the wound in the direction of the heart. And you keep packing the wound just like that until the wound is full. And again, direct pressure. And this is where you must maintain until emergency responders arrive. If the bandage becomes saturated in blood, push it in as much as you can, get more bandage, continue to apply pressure and continue to pack that wound and stop that bleeding. That's called packing the wound. For further instruction, if you Google packing the wound, you'll find some very interesting videos, but viewer beware, they're pretty gruesome. So we've talked about stopping the bleeding. We've talked about direct pressure. We've talked about tourniquet. We've talked about packing the wound. Now there's another injury that we need to talk about that also is here in the kit. Inside your kits, your Jacob kits, behind your trauma bandage and tourniquet, chest seals. Now these chest seals will come out of the Jacob kit just like this. And essentially what a chest seal is fly paper. fly paper. Now what this is designed to do, inside your chest cavity when you breathe, it's all based upon pressures. You don't have to think to breathe unless you're like me and out of shape and you breathe heavy when you move, right? But other than that, just sitting normally, you breathe its normal pressures. Your brain tells your body it's time to breathe. Your diaphragm drops the pressure inside your chest. You breathe in. Diaphragm relaxes, pushes up, increases the pressure. You breathe out. This is how we breathe. But if there is a break in that seal, and there's a break in your thoracic cavity or in your chest, when your diaphragm drops, the pressure drops. Science teachers, high pressure to low pressure, air will flow into that low pressure area, meaning it will come inside the wound. It's called a sucking chest wound. As air begins to build up in the chest cavity, it begins to put pressure on the lungs, make it more difficult to breathe, and it begins to put pressure on the heart until eventually the patient or the student dies. So we have to seal that. So as you expose your patient using your trauma shears, and you've taken a look, if you see any hole in the chest cavity or even upper abdomen, assume that it's going directly into the thoracic cavity and interfering with breathing, and go ahead and treat it. It's not going to hurt the person, it's only going to help the person. Again, it's like fly paper, right? So this is what it will come out looking like. Just like this, only this part will be red to indicate where you pull it. If this was the wound on the chest, you simply peel your fly paper away, find the wound on the chest, place it over the wound, and you've just saved their life. By this fly paper or chest seal being over the wound, as the patient breathes, pressure drops, air cannot get inside. So you'll go ahead and protect them. If you don't have a kit for whatever reason, they're inventoried every year, so all of them do have the chest seals, but if for whatever reason they go missing, or in a panic and fly paper and it gets sticky and you can't use it, you can use anything. You can even use the plastic backing that the fly paper came on, and you can use that as well and tape it down. You can use sandwich bags. You can use anything that's not permeable, put it over the wound to create that seal, and go ahead and tape it down. Now that doesn't mean that the patient won't continue to have problems breathing, but it's definitely going to buy that patient time until your emergency responders can get into you, which could be anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour to keep that patient alive. All right, so we've talked about keeping you safe is priority. Make sure you're safe with your students. Make sure you protect yourself, number one priority. Then we talked about using your scissors to go ahead and expose the entire patient. Find out where the patient is hurt, where the most critical injuries are. We've talked about stopping bleeding. We've talked about using direct pressure. We've talked about using the tourniquet, and we've talked about, my favorite, packing the wound. And we've also talked about using the chest seal. Now all of this training is available online. If you forget or if you need a refresher, we're happy to come back, and I'm sure this video will be accessible to you as well. And hopefully we'll get back in the classrooms and we can do some actual practical experience. The last thing that we ask for teachers to do once you have taken care of your patient is go ahead and we call it a triage. Okay? When we come into that classroom, we have no idea who is more seriously injured. We have no idea who needs to get out first and who can wait. And time is of the essence. The children that need to get to the hospital, we need to get them out, get them going. They're already behind the clock. You're the teachers, you know them best. So as you're assessing the patient that's lost the most blood, pale, bluish skin, not responding appropriately, something you just know as a teacher, something is really wrong with this patient. If it's not obvious, some children can go into shock just from the mere fear of what's going on. They need to go first. So without isolating the students, but try to put the students that are more seriously injured in one area. So as we come into your classroom, you can direct us to the students who need to go first, and we'll get them out and we'll get them to the hospital. And once that's done, you've done all that you can do. No, always, you can't save everybody, right? But we're here to tell you, we're here to train you. So that concludes your Stop the Bleed training this year. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your time here this morning. And please know, beyond Stop the Bleed training for you teachers, we are available to you this school year. We're putting together a video right now that will give you a virtual fire station tour. We'll be talking smoke alarms and addressing some of the health and safety standards in the state of South Carolina to give you all some guest speakers and just kind of break things up and give you videos to use in your classroom. And we're always available to Zoom, whether you just want somebody to come to read to your students or explain something to your students or just to be a guest in your classroom. Just send us a Zoom invite and we'll be here for you. Good luck this year, school teachers. We're here for you. Thank you for everything that you do.